Welcome to the first real devlog for my game, Dreams. Now, this is the first devlog I've ever done, so it might be a little messy, but I do hope you enjoy it. I have a few things on my list to work on today, and we are going to start with programming a way for the player to actually complete a level. As I mentioned in episode 0, which you should go watch as it gives you a good introduction of what my game is, you enter the dream world through a chamber, and, as in Dreams, objects from the real world tend to appear. So the exits for the levels are going to be the chamber. I've already designed it and made an animation for when the player exits the level, so all we need to do now is implement the animation into Unity, then program it so that it ends the level. I started by implementing the animation into Unity using the animator component. This didn't take too much time as I just moved all the sprites into an animation timeline and then slowed it down. Now it was time to start programming. My first idea was to put the animation into the end level script I had already made for the second area in the game. But after spending some time on that, I realized that using that script would actually break the rest of the objects using that script. So instead, I made a new script, creatively called Level End. The script is pretty simple. It waits until the player enters a trigger zone, which starts a timer set for the length of time the animation takes to complete, which runs a function in my loading screen script to activate the loading screen. After getting a ton of errors, it worked. The next thing on my list is to start programming the first platformer enemy. And yes, it is a robot sheep. This enemy just patrols back and forth, and when it collides with an object, or when it lacks floor to walk on, it turns around. I thought this would be easy to program, but it wasn't. What is happening here? In fact, this took so long, I got tired of working and went to sleep. The next morning I had class, so I couldn't work on it until 3 p.m. So I spent some of my free time looking for a good script I could use. I found an interesting one by Blackthorn Prod, a big name in the game dev community, but it only checks for lack of ground, not if there was a wall in front of them. So when I got back to work, I started adapting Blackthorn Prod's script for what I need. I started Unity and programmed Blackthorn Prod's tutorial, and it worked. I had to adjust it a bit by adding a layer mask so it wouldn't keep going if the player was standing in front of it, but other than that, it worked fine. This script works by setting a line, also called a raycast, downwards. If there is no ground, then it will stop and turn around to go the other way. The problem with this script is that if I put a block in its way, it just goes straight through it. I fixed this by adding another raycast that is half the length of the downward ray, but instead it goes out in front of it. Now, we need to make our enemy actually damage the player. But before I did that, I spent a bit of time working on the music for the platformer area, and so far, I think it sounds pretty good. I will keep working on it because it should be pretty long so it doesn't get repetitive after a while, but here's how it sounds. Now, back to programming the enemy. I already have a script to damage the player, so this was pretty quick. All I needed to do was add a few UI images and put them into a script. Next, I had to put the function to damage the player into the enemy's script. Now that I've finished that, let's look at it in action. The next thing on my list definitely won't take a lot of time, and that is looking for a new font for the text in the game. Right now I'm just using one of the default texts that I scaled up to make it look like pixel art, but when I'm writing a lot it looks cloudy and not nice. I'm not sure if I totally like the look of the font I downloaded, but I do think it's better than the old one. Comment down below if you have any font recommendations, and I'll try it in my next video. I had a few more things on my list of things. 1. Make another enemy for the platformer level, but instead, one that chases the player. 2. Work on some of the problems identified by my playtesters. 3. Make a parallax background for the platformer area. 4. Make a camera follow script for the platformer area. And 5. Animate the sheep enemy. Out of these 4 things, I think the one I want to do most is the playtester bugs. This shouldn't take too long, so I will definitely still have time to work on the other things on this list. That was wrong. Very wrong. It took me so long to do all of these, it's ridiculous. Let's start by talking about how I'm handling playtesting at this point in time. I have a Google form that I tell all my playtesters to complete when they finish the game, where I ask a series of questions about the game. Though, the main questions I'm going to look at right now are: what was the worst moment or aspect of the game? Did you encounter any bugs? And what did you think is the most important thing for me to work on? These questions will help me figure out what my playtesters want to see in the game and identify any bugs that might be in the game. Out of these questions, I got a lot of things to work on, but today, let's just work on some of the easier ones. The first thing to work on is that all of my playtesters were saying that when they were supposed to enter the lab, they didn't know that they were supposed to go past the reception's desk. So to fix this, I'm going to place a bar that will retract when the player signs the contract. This is the thing that took forever, and it doesn't even work 100% right. Here's what it ended up looking like. What should I work on next? How about combat? So this is actually something that my playtesters requested, but it is something I need to make for the game anyway, so I'll do it now. The combat is going to be unlocked in the platformer area where your first enemies are present. My original idea was to give the player a generic gun that doesn't do a lot of damage and the bullets fade quickly. The player would be able to get power-ups throughout the game to make it better. The problem with this is that it would be hard to balance, it'd be hard to make since I work on a heart system and not a system like Mario or similar games where when you take damage you lose a power-up or you shrink. And I also just don't think the power-ups work with the gameplay. One thing I could do is have players purchase new guns at shops throughout the map, but for now I think just having one type of gun would be fine. So I hopped into Unity and started working on it. I started by making the actual bullet. I already made a sprite for that bullet, so all I need to do is make a script that will propel the bullet in the direction the player is facing, and then destroy itself after a few seconds. Having the bullet move is pretty easy. I use the Rigidbody 2D add force function to propel the bullet in the direction the player is facing, with a force multiplier that I set to 500. This might seem excessive, but I assure you, it's not. The next step was to set up the enemy so it can be damaged. While I was doing this, I made sure to keep in mind the fact that my combat system might change in future, so I made sure to keep this script very adjustable. Most of the enemy take damage function was just a copy paste of the players, but I had to change around a few things. First, I added upwards knockback, initially by using the add force method that I mentioned earlier, then changing it to modify the velocity of the object so I could stop it easily. Something interesting that happened with the upwards knockback is that since I added a physics material that's bouncy, so when the player takes damage it will be bounce back, so knockback, without me having to adjust it in script, having upwards knockback on the enemy makes it start to bounce. Given that this is a robot sheep, I think this will work fine, and I actually think it looks great. The second thing I adjusted was the color flashing. When the player takes damage, they flash red and white while they are immortal. For the enemy, I made it go invisible, and then flash back, flash out, and flash back, in about 0.1 seconds each time. I did this because making a gray object red doesn't look very nice. Also, the flashing happens for a very short amount of time, as the enemy is not actually immortal. It's just flashing for some feedback. The enemies also have a lot more health than the player, and take 5 hits to destroy. Finally, I also made it so that you can change the amount of damage it takes through the script, and this is if I want to add more weapons that do more damage or something like that, and that's the adjustable thing that I mentioned earlier. Thank you for watching this first Dreams Devlog. I know that most of this video was busy work, but I think this video gives a solid start for my future devlog. The development done in this devlog took place over around 4 days, which equates to 16 hours of work, but in future devlogs it might be longer. It's just that I'm really excited to get this video out, and all of the work I've done in this video already is about 9 minutes long. This devlog was a bit messy, but I hope to get better over time. Next video, we're gonna start planning the full Area 3 map and story, and we are also gonna start looking at boss design and maybe some boss battles. I hope to see you next time, and have a good day.